Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Tuesday, March 1st, and we had some very nice price action yesterday afternoon. Bitcoin running up to test 45K. Much of that on the back of Bitcoin flipping the ruble as, Russian investors and citizens look to store their value somewhere. And, the answer seems to be Bitcoin in many cases. That also led to some short liquidations and really propelled us higher. The entire market really saw some nice price action yesterday, so plenty to talk about today. But before we get started, CJ, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Monty. I don't know if you saw, but the cryptocurrency Waves, this old 2018, 2017 project, was actually Ukrainian-based. Went up over 50% yesterday just because of a ton of activity and speculation around that particular asset. Whether it be actual citizens of Ukraine buying it or just, national speculators or international speculators looking to cash in. Either way, really interesting price action that we're seeing. So excited to dive in and check out Bitcoin. I mean, it was up like 15, 16%. That has not happened, I think, all year.
Yeah, incredible stuff. And one thing that I think, is definitely worth noting is Bitcoin's relationship with the ruble. Like I said, when we started this episode, Bitcoin officially flipped the ruble. The ruble was down hard. And let me just pull up quickly the Bitcoin ruble pair here because that chart looks pretty ridiculous. Let me just quickly pull that up. But also I have some pretty interesting anecdotes from, some Russian citizens about what they've been, doing over the last kind of 48 hours in order to protect their wealth. But here's the chart of, Bitcoin and the ruble. As you can see, this is the daily chart. And we saw that big spike on February 24th and since have continued to climb higher. And, like I said, that's likely the result of Russian citizens looking to, maintain their value. Like we talked about yesterday, there was a bit of a run on the banks as, people tried to quickly get their money out after learning about the SWIFT sanctions. And like I said, just getting to those anecdotes quickly, one person I follow on Twitter, Emil, he tweeted, got a car today, bought it with Bitcoin as all ATMs are almost cleared out and the credit card terminals are down. Hopefully it allows us to report a little from Donbass while also keeping us safe and granting us an escape if things start heating up here. So just found that to be pretty interesting. They're not only, flipping their rubles into Bitcoin, but they're also using that Bitcoin to make purchases. And really, we're starting to see finally an application of that, safe haven narrative that has kind of been eluding us over the last couple of months with all this, talk of inflation, talk of rate hikes. We haven't really seen that narrative take hold. We're starting to see it now. It took a major global conflict, but price is reacting strongly, heading up to retest 45K. Alt's looking strong as well. What are you taking a look at, CJ, as we start off this Tuesday?
I mean, what's not to take a look at, right? There's so much movement. Why don't we just jump in, do a little bit of global macro, then hit BTC in depth. Everything's pretty much down today, other than BTC, is in terms of like global indices. DAX might be quite interesting if we continue to see like negative price action. Just on the downside, it's been one of the much more weaker indices. I think if you were trying to play short plays, I think interesting that some of the European indices have actually been weaker than just SPX and ES. Most notably, though, yields are looking a little bit toppy. I mean, a massive gap down this morning, at least in the short term. So that's going to be good for equities, ideally. Unfortunately, I guess for the bulls or just stocks and equities and crypto in general, like oil is still through the roof, back over 100 today, really showing a lot of bullish price action, but still kind of seeing that divergence on the RSI, just watching it. But overall, I think that 100 level is going to be an interesting resistance because we spent virtually all of 2013 and 2014 kind of at that level or above. So, historic support, possibly future resistance. UKX, taking a look at that, still kind of breaking through that upward sloping rising wedge. We'll see if that kind of continues that turning over pattern that it's had. The NASDAQ, it's not as bad as I said initially. They're hanging in there. They're still bouncing back from the lows and creating some bullish divergence, still riding that out to the next resistance levels. But more importantly, let's get to BTC and let's try to break down and better understand some of this recent price action. So first of all, would I be longing at these levels? No, I am not excited to long at these levels today from a short-term swing perspective. Mainly because I'm looking at this swing high. I don't like how we just recently failed, especially with just overall equities and everything still being very bearish. I want to see if this reaction rally can actually be a little bit more sustained. Usually, after we have really big moves like this, there requires to be some type of churn. When you look at this on like a 30 minutes or hourly time frame, basically we are failing after being overbought, going right into a primary level of resistance. So I'm not really looking to long immediately at this level. In instance or a situation which would make me interested in getting long, and you'll guys notice that I have this upward sloping trend line drawn right below price. That is the beginning or the possible beginning of a ascending triangle. I forgot my drawing tool because it's attached to my browser. Hang on a sec. But yeah, I'm using the TradingView desktop app today, so a little bit more room. Hopefully you guys can see. But let me change the color here. So what I'm looking for is a rejection from this level and a higher low at 40 to 41K. If we see a bounce from that level, I will look to long and expect continual possible breakthrough to these higher levels at that ascending triangle. Putting in, these macro higher lows, very bullish. Those wicks indicating supply absorption, just very bullish overall as well. Might be a little bit of a struggle today because of the drawing tool, but just give me some patience and bear with me, please, folks. Let's take a brief overview at trend because there's a lot of things that are changing today. So let's just go through the vast majority of broad indicators. Something that we were looking at earlier in the week were the Keltner channels. We were talking about how this level of the mid band right at 40K was proving as such strong resistance. Short squeeze through that level. Now I'm going to look to buy off of that support level with a tight stop to see if it holds. Maybe we can actually form that ascending triangle thesis to break higher into the 50s. I think that the likelihood is definitely increasing though. But as you can see, we're coming right up against the top of that channel. Probably going to run into a little bit of interim resistance. Macro trend scanner. Obviously, we had that fake out last week or 2 weeks ago now, when we rejected at 45. But today we're starting to get the cross of the EMA. A lot of algorithms and machines are kicking in on the backs of that signal. Similar thing with the TWAP. Williams Alligator, really interesting because you actually see the moving averages putting in a higher low. They came down. Obviously, we had our bullish cross fake out, but now we've had another bullish cross here. We're turning up prices above the alligators. And when you see that green, I think they call it the jaws of the alligator. I forgot what exactly Williams called this term, but there's either like the claw or the jaw of the alligator is turning up and showing that buy signal. Very bullish in the Williams alligator. Bollinger Bands, we talk about that one strategy where if you get a break above the outer band, you can typically ride that until you get a close below the outer band, which is typically a good trailing stop. You can see that today has been the first time we've actually broken out from that level and had the possibility of a long trade. I'm not super enthusiastic to jump in it just because we were up. We had our greatest day of the year yesterday, so I'm going to wait for the churn to kind of come out a little bit, see how the market digests it. And then finally, sequential, something that you guys already know here that we've already talked about. This TD9 starting to look like a potential bottom signal after we created this higher low, very similar to the fact that we created this TD sequential 9 and marked the top very near March 14th. So you can see the confluence coming together. you can see a lot of these indicators and technical formations lining up for something interesting. I think the broader question is how is BTC going to perform in equities or in relation to equities, and how are they going to hold up, in the coming weeks? But overall, these ascending triangles at the bottom of downtrends have historically been really accurate. I mean, this is one of my favorite examples in the depths of the bear market. It's really that simple. You just have higher lows hitting at the same resistance level. Once that resistance level breaks, things can get really interesting. And the same is true for the downside price action as well with these descending triangles. In a bear market, consistent lower highs following on one key resistance level, eventually breaking down. Those are all going to be things that we have to watch for. Last thing, then I'll pass it back to you, Monty, is something I want to talk about known as the Bitcoin dominance RSI strategy. So we talk a lot about Bitcoin dominance here and how it relates to the crypto market in general. I think this indicator and Bitcoin dominance in general can give you a really good understanding of when you want to be in Bitcoin, when you want to be in alts, and potentially when you want to think about getting short the market. So how I use this model and what I like to look at it for specifically is the start of new trends, and then when trends are getting very much overheated. So that doesn't mean I'm taking like every single buy signal on this chart. Being said, look at a buy signal like this, in July, where we had basically the entire market was washed of speculators in the short term, at least. People were very bullish. Then Bitcoin and its first short squeeze, that led the market to recover first. And that's where you can see this green tint of the Bitcoin dominance RSI really increasing. And so that's triggering a long trade in Bitcoin because, that's where you want to be. You don't want to be in the alts just yet. Typically that comes later on in times where we get like these shades of red, where people are taking profits in Bitcoin. They're moving it to riskier assets, potentially, alts down the totem pole, so to speak. But overall, these signals are telling you to pay attention when we cross into the green shades. You can see that we've just done that this morning. And also, the short signals are good. When you're getting near a macro top and alts are going absolutely ballistic, it's going to tell you maybe you should take some off of Bitcoin here because the altcoins are going absolutely parabolic. Things might be getting a little bit frothy. I hate that word. We really need to come up with a different type of terminology, but I mean, you get the picture. A lot of macro confluence and really interesting stuff coming together. So amidst the uncertainty, I mean, bullish price action has been pretty prominent. But, we'll see. I'll buy that pullback, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. And sometimes I swear, CJ, sometimes I think you can read my mind because, you cover a lot of things there, but at the end you wrapped up with that Bitcoin dominance indicator. And I actually was preparing while you were talking there to just pull up this Bitcoin dominance chart because I think we are at some, a critical point in time here. And, just looking at it in context with that indicator that you mentioned, the Bitcoin dominance RSI, I think is very useful. So like you said, and like you pointed out, we're breaking into a point where Bitcoin dominance is starting to gain ground. We talked about this ascending triangle that was emerging, just like Bitcoin's price action. We put in this higher low with this resistance level that we failed to get over, and then just yesterday, we broke through this level on some very strong price action. All of which was fueled by the things we talked about earlier. Russians, exiting the ruble and looking for Bitcoin. Regardless, Bitcoin dominance is gaining ground here, and I've just highlighted a couple key levels where, one, we may find some resistance. First and foremost, we have just below 45% Bitcoin dominance. This is a level that we've kind of, hit a little bit of resistance in the past. And what it typically looks like when Bitcoin dominance hit resistance is we see the alts start to run just a little bit. But ultimately, it's not until this point here. And this would be the point at which on CJ's Bitcoin RSI chart, the green line was at the peak. So when the Bitcoin dominance is at the peak right here, this is when you should be thinking about lightening up on Bitcoin and looking to the alts. When we get to this level, if we start to see a similar pattern emerging here where we get a bearish engulfing candle at the top of the trend, I would start to lighten up my Bitcoin allocation and look to, diversify into some of the higher beta alts. Historically, that is, the best way to maximize your gains during a cycle. That's what CJ's Bitcoin RSI strategy was, kind of implying. And just looking at this chart, this is, typically indicative, this breakout here, that Bitcoin will be gaining ground. And the fact that we saw, many of the alts show tremendous price action yesterday, you'd be hard pressed to find an alt that didn't have a green day yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of profit taking and some of that, capital flowing back into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, continuing to gain ground on the rest of the market. This is typically something we see, as kind of the first leg out of a bear market, first, stages of a bear cycle. And, that would kind of imply, like CJ pointed out, that TD9 on the Bitcoin chart was perhaps the bottom for this portion of the market cycle. So, now that Bitcoin is showing strength, I think that's very bullish for the rest of the market. And, ultimately, I think that just timing this Bitcoin dominance chart just looking at Bitcoin dominance and also using that Bitcoin RSI strategy is going to be a really good way to kind of time your entry into some of these altcoins. So, yesterday we obviously saw, a strong pop across the board, but I think that, going forward, we'll see, more sustained positive price action from Bitcoin than we will from a lot of these altcoins that, went somewhat parabolic yesterday. That's just what we've seen historically. And that's kind of what Bitcoin dominance is telling us right now. So, yeah, that's about all I got. I'm glad you mentioned that RSI strategy, because I think that that's definitely going to be, important to maximizing your gains in this market cycle.
Yeah, and keeping you disciplined. You mentioned that, they ramped it up yesterday. It was literally saved the monthly chart by 12 hours. Let's take a look at that though, just for kicks.
And I think today, the time to watch for some price action will be the same time that we saw that price action yesterday, around 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Central. That's when we've been seeing the volatility over the last couple of weeks here. We saw it last week on, Thursday, and we saw it yesterday at, around 4 p.m. Central. It moved to 45K with more or less no noticeable catalyst. So going to be exciting to watch that time today. But what are we seeing on the monthly chart, CJ?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's just nice to see those wicks from supply absorption. Clearly, if we would have finished this month with a bearish engulfing, not completely engulfing, but inverted hammer or something like that, that would have been exceedingly bearish. But the traders saved this one one day before going into the monthly close. So just quite interesting. Yeah, TWAP still negative on the monthly. This is the one interesting metric that I think is worth watching. Obviously, the cycle's not going to be identical to the previous two, but it is kind of interesting to see that beginning to flip bearish. We'll see if we end up at 50, 55K by the end of the month of March here, then, we won't have a flip to the negative momentum there. But just a little macro view. Not a whole lot to take from it, though.
Thanks for that. One last thing, or actually, I guess two last things I just want to hit before we wrap up today's episode. Just a couple of news pieces. One, another news piece that I find near and dear to my heart. FC Barcelona plans to create its own cryptocurrency. Last week, I talked about Manchester City, my favorite team, creating their own metaverse, trying to create a one-to-one replica of the Etihad Stadium for international fans to watch in the metaverse. Barcelona is doing the same thing, and it's been interesting because they've turned down several offers from various exchanges, crypto companies, NFT platforms to offer a sponsorship. But Barcelona wanted to create their own, do it in-house. And one thing I found particularly interesting is that in this article they talk about how within the contract of many of these, players, they already have a clause about participating in, the metaverse and participating in NFTs. So I found that very interesting. And, I think that Barcelona is one of the biggest clubs in the world. There's no doubt about it. They have a massive international fan base. So if, any club could pull off this metaverse narrative, I think it would be Barcelona. So, they're talking about adding their first range of NFTs soon. They're also planning on creating a virtual replica of their stadium, and even creating their own token to fuel that metaverse economy. So some another positive news piece, and then one more to wrap it up. This is kind of gaining some traction this morning. Ken Griffin talked about Russia, market chaos, and a move to go public. And within this report from Bloomberg, he talks about how within the next year he plans on getting Citadel involved more intimately with crypto. He's kind of been a naysayer in the past, but he's starting to flip his stance, and I find that to be very, very bullish. I think we need more institutional adoption, more institutional on ramps, and having a massive firm like Citadel backing Bitcoin is obviously bullish. So wrapping it up with a couple positive news pieces there, but I think that's all we got for today. Anything else you want to add, CJ, before we wrap things up?
No, just thanks everybody for watching, and hope you have a great day out there. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care.